and welcome to the Uncultured Nerd Show. My name is Maeve, and I am an uncultured nerd who loves to revisit all the media from my childhood, no matter how many hours of my life I seem to be wasting. And why waste only a few hours on various films when I could waste dozens of hours on multiple TV shows? Yes, we're taking a break from movies and taking a look at some of the TV shows I watched as a child. Despite not having cable, I surprisingly watched a lot because of all the DVDs my family would borrow from the library. And also one particular channel which pretty much shaped my entire childhood. I wasn't sure which one I wanted to talk about, so I decided to do a big hodgepodge and leave the possibility of talking more in depth about some of these shows in the future. So without further ado, let's get into my top 10 favorite childhood TV shows. In a world where everyone's gotta catch 'em all and fight each other with them, Ash Ketchum, along with his friend Misty and Brock, travel around the Pokemon world doing some stuff. Okay, so this one is a bit of a cheat, cause I watched maybe 20 episodes of this show growing up, and I remember very little about it. My mom thought it was too violent, so even though me and my brother both collected the cards, I actually still have my card collection, which I'm pretty sure might be worth a lot of money if I ended up selling it. We weren't allowed to watch the show. And of course we abided by her wishes. Okay, yeah, we snuck it. But in a bit of a weird way. Basically, we didn't know how our TV or cable worked. I'm not sure why, but we never figured out that our TV at home had more than just PBS on it. Which, by the way, will show up a lot on this list. But somehow we did figure out that the 8-inch box TV in our grandparents' kitchen would play cartoons if we pressed the right buttons on the remote. And of course, none of it made sense. Every time we saw an episode, we were missing dozens of other episodes to give context, and usually we just thought, hey, it's our cards moving around, that's cool. Is that a story along? I don't care, more fighting! The memories of the show are vague, but I mainly put it on this list because it was one of the few shows me and my brother bonded over. He got into Pokemon first, then I followed and outlasted him. Like I said, I still have both of our collections, which I don't know, maybe it's worth something. Let me know if you see anything good. So even though I don't know what the storylines were and haven't revisited the world except through the card game, I still wanted to include this as a little send-up to my big brother. Miss you, dude. Have fun living in Hawaii. A family of lions live in a big library and spend their time getting into shenanigans, and also, surprise, surprise, they read a lot. Along with the main characters, a bunch of recurring segments show up with all sorts of different reading comprehension purposes, and some so weird they are permanently seared into my brain. And with this, we start the great PBS run on this list. This network is going to show up a lot here, cause that's the only channel we thought we had growing up. Between the Lions is kind of a weird example, cause I don't really remember the main story, but I do remember all the extra stuff, the little side segments which showed up. Gawain's World, Tiger Words, Chicken Jane, and Cliffhanger, with by far my favorite being the last one. Cliffhanger followed the title character as he held onto a tree root off the side of a cliff and tried various ways to get down, but always ended up back in the same position. I think I liked it because I liked coming up with better solutions than Cliff came up with, which would have gotten him out of his situation much better than what he did try. Oh, and I can't not mention the infamous character who I had actually forgotten about until I rewatched some episodes, Artie Smarty Pants. Who the hell designed this thing? It's like a Tim Burton fever dream come to life. It's just, ugh. But what's a good kid show without a bit of extreme weirdness to prepare us for the insanity of life? And also, apparently, this was the reason I was an above-average reader, because I did watch this show a lot, and studies have shown that this show was one of the most effective in increasing reading skills in young students. So, thanks, Lions. Don't ever change. The Cyber Squad travels across Earth and cyberspace to protect the motherboard from hacker through math and problem solving. This was the other show that me and my brother liked to watch together. When we first started watching it, I was too young to figure out the solutions, and he was at about the age of them being difficult but not impossible, so I would watch as he figured stuff out and would be amazed at his genius. But then it was so cool to eventually actually be able to solve the problems before the characters did and learn with them as I got older. But along with the math and problem solving, this show was honestly great. One big thing I remember loving was that there were 2 girls to 1 boy. Finally, the girls outnumbered the boys in a math show. Also, the design of this world was pretty cool, and I will be honest, I think maybe a lot of my memories are just my big brother hyping it up so much. Also, can we talk about how awesome Hacker was as a villain? Even though he was a lot more comedy than threatening, he was still a presence as a villain. And I recently found out he was voiced by Christopher frickin' Lloyd, who can seriously do no wrong. And must we not forget the late great Gilbert Gottfried as Digit. As an adult, Digit would probably be annoying, but he was a highlight as a kid. Honestly, there's not a ton of specifics I remember about this show. The main parts that stick out to me were the excitement of figuring out the equations before the characters, and how awesome it was to go from not getting them at all to solving them quicker than my brother. This is a bit of a shorter entry because it's not so much specifics I remember, but more the hype around the show. The designs were cool, the characters were cool, and it's all around just a really cool show. Over 3 seasons, this show covered the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th entries in the C.S. Lewis fantasy series, The Chronicles of Narnia. As a kid, this was my Game of Thrones. I absolutely loved this series. We had all the books, a full cast audio production, and this very clearly dated but still wonderfully immersive TV show on DVD. I'll be honest, even when I was remembering the show before I rewatched it, I was remembering some elements which pointed to the visual limitations of the time. Of course, the CGI used is very limited, and when it does show up, it's quite noticeable, but like I said, it has very limited usage. The majority of the effects are in camera with full bodysuits, makeup, and giant puppets. And there's one big thing I have to commend it on, which may not be a popular option. I'm really glad that the animated creatures were kept 2D and they didn't make them 3D. Even though it's obvious it doesn't fit in the live action world, it's actually less distracting than I think a big ugly CG creature would have been. As it stands, the animation on these creatures is actually pretty good, and it's amazing this thing turned out as well as it did because this book series is not easy to do. I mean, it's basically a more kid-friendly version of Lord of the Rings. Fun fact, the 2 authors were actually really good friends. The environments are massive, the characters are huge, and the battles are written as epically as possible. Not all of it has been translated well onto the screen. The final battle in particular kind of looks like I got a camera and some LARPing friends and we shot in the backwoods for a few hours. When compared to the remake, which came out a few decades later, visually, it's not really a competition, but for the storytelling and characters, I think this series holds its own. I really appreciate how in this show, the ages of the 4 main characters were kept closer to what they were in the book. In the movie, they're all aged several years, and the actors were even older than that. While here, it's very obvious how young everyone is and how much more impressive it is when they face the danger all the time. When this guy's going to battle, I'm like, yeah, he's plenty old enough to enlist, but when these 2 go into battle, it's like the Helm's Deep scene. So yeah, I'm not sure how many people in the States grew up with this one. I'm not totally sure why my family had it, but despite its obvious age and some dated effects, I think it's worth a watch for all the effort that clearly went into every scene. The Kratt brothers started with Zoboomafoo, teaching us all about different kinds of animals alongside their sometimes real, sometimes puppet lemur pal named Zoboomafoo. After that show wrapped up, the brothers returned in cartoon form in a more adventure and story-based show which also focused on wildlife education while also fighting evil animal abusers and polluters. So I've decided to put these together because I didn't want to take up 2 extra slots, but I also couldn't decide which one to include. Technically, Zoboomafoo was the show I watched as a kid, and Wild Kratts was what my little brother was watching when I came home from school and my mom was still tutoring. Even though I was aging out of the intended demographic, I still enjoyed the Wild Kratts almost as much as Zoboomafoo. These were probably the shows that inspired my childhood and still lasting love for nature and animals. I already had a bit of a leg up in that department because I was raised vegetarian. Don't worry, I'm not annoying about it or anything, although I definitely used to be. But also nature was a pretty big part of my life. My family couldn't really afford to go on vacations. We never went to amusement parks or anything like that. So our family outings were to museums and zoos, supplemented by those handy-dandy library passes for discounted or free entry. And I absolutely loved it. I was such a nut for animals. I just loved watching them so much, and my ambition for many years was to either be a vet or a zookeeper. But back to the shows, Zoboomafoo is definitely more my style. I prefer getting to know the animals in real life as opposed to in a cartoon world. Yes, I eventually graduated to Crocodile Hunter. The chemistry on screen is also really great. Obviously, they are brothers, so of course there's chemistry, but their energy is so infectious, and just like the show I eventually graduated to, their genuine love for animals shines brightly through the screen. It sounds weird, but I actually think the bigger adventures and character-driven stories could sometimes take away from the more educational elements, but that does seem to be where most kid shows went between mine and my brother's generations, focusing more on engaging stories with educational undertones than overtones. Which I think is great. It's probably harder to do, but since I grew up with Zoboomafoo, Brain Pop, and Bill Nye's style, it's just the one I prefer. And one last thing, upon rewatch, there was this segment I had completely forgotten about, but crashed back into my memory the minute it came up up on screen. What the heck was with PBS and weird fever dream segments? So as a wrap-up, Zaboomafoo stands a little higher for me, but I couldn't leave Wild Kratts off the list. Think of it as a shout out to my little brother. Miss you, bro. Have fun in college. In this show, Miss Frizzle takes all her students on wild adventures in her magic school bus where educational fun is had by all. This show is the first time I remember being the one to point out all the differences between the book and the adaptation. I honestly don't remember if I watched the show or read the books first, but I loved both of them for different reasons. The show is definitely more digestible with more fleshed out characters. Each student has a distinct personality and different strength they bring to the group. Personally, my favorite was always Tim, because I related to him a lot, being the really quiet one. But for real, this group of kids is just so amazingly done. None of them are too flawed or too perfect. They're just normal kids. The voice acting also, it's great, and it's actually all kids. And speaking of voice acting, Miss Amazing herself, Lily Tomlin as Miss Frizzle. What can I say about her? She's just perfect. I can't even begin to explain how amazingly written a character Miss Frizzle is. Her calm presence throughout seemingly horrifying situations makes what should be scary a little less anxiety-inducing. And she is always just in control of everything, even if she's literally being strung up in a web. But my favorite thing about her character, and I think the thing that makes her such an amazing teacher, is that she makes the kids figure out the questions on their own. Of course, she knows all the answers already and could just tell them what's going on, but instead we have a hands-on experience which ensures the lesson won't be forgotten by the characters or the audience watching. I remember I was in science class, a subject I really struggled in, and we began a section on light. I literally knew everything we were taught in that class already because of the Magic School Bus. Somehow it managed to convey complex subjects like ecosystems, historical preservation, and physics to very young students. It really was lightning in a bottle, as the reboot showed how difficult it is to make a show that balances so much fun and so much learning, even with such a genius concept as a starting point. It was truly one of a kind, and I don't think we'll see anything like it ever again. A group of kids in the greater Boston area are brought together by an animated dog to complete challenges for points and rewards to hopefully become the grand winner. Now, this was not only a show I loved, but the show I wanted to be on. I desperately wanted to be one of the kids, but my mom didn't care about my dreams. Actually, I don't think I would have done well on this show. As much as I liked watching the kids my age do stuff, I don't think I would have wanted to do it in real life if faced with the opportunity. Also, despite living in Massachusetts, we were still over an hour from Boston, so I didn't really meet the qualifications. But back to the show, this thing is just awesome. For the number one reason that it is just empowering in a very positive way to kids. Shows like the Disney Channel show kids doing whatever they want, which definitely empowered my little brother to be a little piece of shit for many years. But Fetch empowered kids to take on challenges and work hard to achieve real goals. I mean, they work in chocolate factories, calculate the size of the solar system, create music videos, learn from Penn and Teller, and perform a full court case. This is awesome! That's what I loved as a kid, but looking at the production history as an adult, I cannot believe the versatility of this host. Jim Conroy, I'm pretty sure, voiced every single animated character on this show, and those characters racked up to the dozens. It's also pretty incredible how seamlessly the animated portions meld with the live-action ones. Of course, as an adult, I know they filmed the live-action bits first, then animated for seamless interaction, but as a kid, I really believed those kids were talking to an animated dog in real time. And I missed my chance to be one of those kids. It's fine, I'm over it. I'm not. I'm kidding, I am. It keeps me up at night. Thanks for the fun and inspiration, Fetch. I hope they bring you back. Okay, what can I say about Sesame Street? Everyone knows the show, everyone knows the characters, and everyone knows the incredible impact it has had on multiple generations. I honestly don't remember many details from any episodes. The parts which stand out in my mind the most are Elmo's World, Letter of the Day, and Number of the Day. Whenever I think about watching it, I just remember being happy. And apparently the whole time I was also learning. How dare you trick me into that? I also loved playing the various Sesame Street games on the PBS Kids website, which sadly ran on Flash and I cannot access anymore. Believe me, I've tried. And I honestly don't have much else to say because it's a lot more feelings than specifics whenever I think about this show, but those feelings are so warm and fuzzy. It's the feeling of after-school snacks and colorful characters that delighted me and millions of others, and thank goodness there is no sign of the quality falling or the education going away anytime soon. By far my shortest entry, but who am I kidding? You know how great it is already. In this show, an abbey of peaceful woodland creatures is put under siege by a group of evil rats led by Clooney the Scourge. The abbey leaders do not want to fight, but one young orphan mouse, Matthias, follows in the footsteps of the legendary warrior Martin to protect the abbey and fulfill the prophecy to become the Abbey Warrior. This was one of the most frustrating shows as a child because we could never get the whole show on DVD. For some reason, the DVDs at our local libraries had just 3 episodes each on them, so the whole show was spread out over about 4 DVDs. And the library only had the first and the last one. So we would go from the rats showing up to the abbey to immediately them breaking in for the final battle, skipping everything in the middle. As kids, we didn't really notice, but one day we were at another library in another neighboring town, and they just happened to have the 3rd set, so we watched that and finally realized all the stuff we thought they were just being vague about was actually fully explained, and we were just missing the entire middle part of the show. And even with that 3rd DVD, we were still missing 3 episodes, which I didn't actually watch until high school when I decided to rewatch the full show on YouTube. By that point, I had read the book and knew what happened, but it was so weird to watch these episodes and have memories rekindle for some of them, and then have others be completely new. But let's get to why this show is good, and number one, I think it's because it does not skimp on the dark stuff. The book, although using cute animals as its main character, has some messed up moments, and a lot of those moments are included in the cartoon. I mean, in just the first 6 minutes, the main character's family is attacked by an evil rat with a sword for a tail, his parents presumably die, he and his sister walk miles to safety, and his sister dies from exhaustion after carrying him for so long. It's a lot to start your show with, especially one meant for kids. And for real, the villain of the show is one bad guy, and his journey throughout the series shows him very clearly falling into obsession and insanity, which is pretty creepy to watch, especially when it comes to his nightmares. Also, there's a whole lot of dying in this show. There is the predictable old mentor death, but a lot of the cute side characters are axed off on their missions, and the whole idea of good guys being above killing is out the window. They constantly talk about how killing Clooney is the only solution, and they tried a few times before the final battle, actually killing one of his henchmen in the crossfire. They sort of say it taints the abbey to have blood on their hands, but it's quickly looked over for the greater good of the residents. It's a harsh truth type of show which doesn't give easy solutions for the audience. I mean, these characters are constantly getting hammered. They just can't get a break the entire show. That's what I remember being so engaged in, the constant struggle these characters face to keep their abbey safe, but their resilience in the face of that danger. I do remember being a little annoyed at Cornflower for being too much of a damsel in distress, but on the other hand, Constance is effing awesome. She's literally the bodyguard of the whole abbey while still being the caring nursemaid to the children, and I just find that so cool. It's been a while since a full rewatch, but I think it's time to dive back in because this show is one wild ride. And before I get to the number 1 spot, I want to take a quick second to recognize an honorable mention, which is VeggieTales. My goodness, did we love this show growing up. Although we weren't raised religious, my grandfather was a minister, so this was a common Christmas gift in the form of VHS tapes. And we really loved them. However, it is technically not a TV show, it's a series of short films. But it's incredible that it still stands as one of the only quality religious shows that isn't overly preachy and is very viewable across the religious spectrum. And let's get to number 1, and I don't think there's going to be much argument that this show deserves the number 1 spot. Water, Earth, Fire, Air. Seriously, what else could be number 1? This is arguably one of the greatest animated shows ever made, and is the first show my family ever watched together as it aired. Now, the story of how we discovered it is a little unusual. While we were living in Australia, there was a local bar which for some reason had a playroom. I didn't live in the country for that long, so I'm not sure that this was a common thing, but in Armidale, there was a bar which had one. Now, in the playroom, there were books, games, all sorts of things, and also a television. And TV was still a big no-no during the day, so my mom would always request it be turned off when we were there, which everyone was fine with, but one day she forgot to ask, and I spent a good half hour watching an episode of what I would soon discover was Avatar: The Last Airbender. The episode I saw was episode 2, and after a few weeks we discovered the season 1 box set at the local rental store. However, it wasn't until we moved back to the States that we finally all sat down as a family 4 times a week and watched our way through the series. By the time we finished the 2nd season, the 3rd season was in the middle of airing, but since we didn't have cable cable, or maybe we did, I have no idea what to believe. We had to wait until it came out on DVD so that we could borrow it from the library. I remember when we finally got to the final episode, it was very special because my parents let us watch the full thing in one sitting, which was pretty rare. And the reason I bring this up is because there is no way my parents would have put the effort into finding this and letting us watch it regularly if they hadn't also been super into the show, especially my dad. He is a third-degree black belt and studies many forms of martial arts, so seeing many different styles accurately portrayed in a supposed kids show was mind-blowing for him. His specialty is Aikido, so his favorite episodes were always the ones with the Kyoshi warriors since their fighting style has many Aikido elements. But let's get to specifics. What makes this show so great? Goddamn everything! The animation is beautiful, the characters are complex and relatable, the jokes are legitimately funny, the arcs everyone goes through on their journeys are astoundingly well done! The thing is, I can't add anything to what so many have said before me because they're all 100% right! This show is an absolute masterpiece, and I'm so happy I got to be there when it was released. I have not watched the new live-action show, and I'm not going to. However, I'm elated that the original creators are bringing us more fully planned out Avatar content in the next few years. Yes, I have seen Korra, and my thoughts on it are pretty much everyone else's. It was good, but clearly there were limitations given the uncertainty of each new season. But even if these new adventures don't live up to the original, that's honestly fine by me, because I will always have this masterpiece preserved on physical media, and you better believe if the zombies show up, this is going in my survival bag. It must be remembered for all time for how effing awesome it is! And that's about it for this episode of Childhood Rewind. Man, this was fun. Rewatching a lot of these shows brought back so many memories. I am curious, what were your favorite childhood TV shows? Do they hold up, or were they just glorified babysitters? And let me know if you'd like to see more top 10 lists, because I've got plenty of childhood media to rewind through. Thank you so much to all my fellow freaks for watching, and I'll see you next time with something else. See y'all later!